Right now, somewhere inside Tehran, a decision is being made, not by one person, not anymore. The chain of command is fractured, the supreme leader is gone, and what replaces centralized leadership in a shared revolutionary state is not chaos, it is something far more dangerous. It is distributed conviction. So today, I want to walk you through three scenarios, three very specific paths that open up the moment Iran formally commits to revenge over any negotiated settlement. And I want to be precise here because most of what you read online about this conflict is either emotional or it is propaganda. What I am going to give you is structure, geometry, because geopolitics, when you strip away the noise, follows patterns, and those patterns can be predicted. I've spent months researching what's coming between 2026 and 2030, and I put it all into an ebook called The Next Global Shift, How to Stay Ahead of Economic Collapse and War. The economies, the conflicts, the moves you need to make. If you want my ebook, link in the caption and comment section. Let's get into the video. First, I need to make sure we are all starting from the same place. Here is the basic situation as it stands. The United States and Israel have conducted strikes on Iran. The supreme leader is confirmed dead. The Strait of Hormuz, that narrow 33-kilometer channel through which 20% of the world's oil moves every single day, is now under Iranian threat. The GCC countries, which means the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, they are caught in the middle. They have American military bases on their soil, which makes them targets. And they have zero natural defense against Iranian drone and missile capabilities from the Zagros Mountains. Now here's a question that actually matters. The Americans assumed that removing the leadership would cause the system to collapse. That is a doctrine called shock and awe. Cut the head off and the body falls. But the Iranian system was not built the way the Americans think it was built. It was built for exactly this moment. Decentralized command, regional militias with independent orders, a population that, whatever its politics, now has a martyred leader to avenge, that is not a weakened adversary, that is a motivated one. So Iran has a choice. It can negotiate or it can commit to a path of revenge. And if it chooses revenge, here are the three ways that plays out. Scenario one, the controlled bleed. This is the most likely scenario in the short term, and it is the one the Americans are least prepared for. Iran does not escalate to full war, not immediately. Instead, it does something much smarter. It bleeds the system slowly. Think about what Iran actually has available to it right now. It has an estimated 80,000 Shahed drones. Each one costs between 35,000 and 50,000 US dollars to produce. They are small. They are easy to transport. They can be hidden anywhere in the Zagros mountain range, loaded onto trucks, driven to a launch point, and sent anywhere in the Gulf within hours. Now here is the asymmetry that defines this scenario. To shoot down one $50,000 drone, the United States fires a missile from a THAAD or Patriot system that costs between $1 million and $3 million per interceptor. And these systems miss. So you often fire 2 or 3. Do that math. Iran spends $50,000, America spends $3 million to $9 million per drone, per intercept. And Iran makes approximately 500 of these drones per day. This is not a war of armies. This is a war of economic endurance. In scenario one, Iran targets 3 specific categories of infrastructure across the Gulf: water, power, oil. The desalination plants that supply 60% of the GCC's fresh water are not hardened military targets. They are large, stationary, and easy to locate. A single drone strike on a major desalination facility does not just damage infrastructure. It creates a water crisis for a civilian population that imports 80% of its food and cannot survive without manufactured water. Dubai, Bahrain, Abu Dhabi. These cities run on imported everything. The moment water security becomes uncertain, the expatriate population, which is 90% of Dubai, begins to leave. And when that population leaves, the financial ecosystem that has been built in the Gulf collapses with it. Here is the strategic logic of scenario 1. Iran does not need to win a military battle. It needs to win an economic one. And in a controlled bleed, it does exactly that. It drains American defense resources. It destabilizes the GCC. It erodes confidence in the petrodollar system. And it does all of this without triggering a full American ground invasion, which would require a political decision that Washington is not ready to make. The Americans cannot stop this scenario. Their military doctrine was designed for Cold War symmetry: fixed bases, aircraft carriers, expensive weapon systems meant to signal power rather than fight a drone war. The infrastructure is wrong. The doctrine is wrong. And by the time the doctrine changes, the damage is done. Scenario 1 does not end the war. It exhausts one side into a political crisis. Scenario 2, the proxy expansion. This scenario runs parallel to scenario 1, but it adds a second layer that the Americans genuinely cannot manage. Iran does not fight alone. It never has. For 40 years, the Iranian strategic model has been to build and maintain a network of armed proxy forces across the entire Middle East. In Lebanon, you have Hezbollah. In Yemen, you have the Houthis. In Iraq, you have the Popular Mobilization Forces. In Syria, there are several Iranian-backed militia groups. In Pakistan, in Afghanistan, there are Shia communities that are now mobilized by the killing of the supreme leader. In scenario 2, Iran activates all of these simultaneously. Now think about what that means from a logistics standpoint for the United States. Right now, America is managing strikes on Iran, trying to protect its bases across the Gulf, managing political pressure from the GCC, watching the Strait of Hormuz, and monitoring the nuclear question. That is already a complex operational picture. Now add simultaneous Hezbollah rocket campaigns into northern Israel. Add Houthi missile strikes resuming against shipping lanes in the Red Sea, which means the Suez Corridor, which means European energy supply. Add militia attacks on American bases in Iraq and Syria. Add embassy attacks in Pakistan and beyond. You have not changed the size of the Iranian military. You have multiplied the number of fronts America has to cover. And America does not have the resources, the political will, or the public support for a simultaneous multi-front conflict across 5 countries. Here is the part that is worth understanding carefully. The GCC countries, specifically Bahrain, have a demographic reality that makes scenario 2 extraordinarily destabilizing. Bahrain has a majority Shia population living under a Sunni monarchy. That monarchy exists because of American military backing. The US Fifth Fleet is based in Bahrain. But if Iran is calling for a Shia jihad, if the supreme leader has been martyred, then the Shia population of Bahrain is being called to rise, not by a politician, by their religion. What happens in Bahrain matters enormously. Because if Bahrain destabilizes, the Fifth Fleet loses its anchor. And if the Fifth Fleet loses its anchor in the Gulf, the American military projection capacity in the entire region collapses. Scenario 2 is about stretching America thin and then pulling the anchor out from under it. The counter to this scenario, from an American perspective, would require something the US has not done since the Second World War: a full mobilization. 500,000 to 2 million ground troops deployed into the region to hold it together physically. And that is a domestic political conversation that no current administration is equipped to have. So in scenario 2, Iran wins not by defeating the US military. It wins by making the cost of this war politically unsustainable inside the United States. Scenario 3, the civilizational bet. This is the highest risk scenario, and it is the one with the most transformative long-term consequences. In scenario 3, Iran stops thinking in military terms entirely. It starts thinking in civilizational terms. And the goal shifts from winning the war to reordering the world. Here is the underlying logic. The American empire, what we can call the current global order, rests on one thing, the petrodollar. The arrangement is simple. GCC nations sell oil. They demand payment in US dollars. That demand creates global demand for the dollar itself. That demand for dollars allows America to print money, run deficits, maintain its military empire, and dominate global financial markets. The GCC nations take those oil dollars and reinvest them back into American financial markets. You can look at UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait investment flows into the S&P 500, into NASDAQ, into the 7 AI companies that now represent roughly a quarter of American market capitalization. NVIDIA, Microsoft, Google, Apple, Meta. If the GCC collapses, those capital flows stop. And if those capital flows stop, those valuations collapse. And if those valuations collapse, you are looking at something the American economy has not experienced since 1929. In scenario 3, Iran makes a deliberate civilizational bet. It says the following: we cannot win this war militarily in the traditional sense, but we can destroy the economic foundation of the empire that is attacking us. And we can do it by completing one task: permanently closing or destabilizing the Strait of Hormuz. Not temporarily, permanently, or at least for long enough to fundamentally restructure the global energy system. Japan gets 75% of its oil through that strait. South Korea is deeply dependent. India at 60%. China at 40%. If those nations have to spend the next 2 to 5 years urgently rerouting supply chains, building alternative pipelines, restructuring their energy imports, the global economy contracts in ways that damage American financial markets far more than any Iranian missile ever could. At the same time, in scenario 3, Iran is making a political play. The goal is not just to survive, the goal is to emerge as the leader of the Muslim world, not just the Shia world, the entire Muslim world. Most of the governments across the Muslim world, Egypt, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, are deeply unpopular with their own populations. They are American client states, autocracies that exist because Washington tolerates them. If Iran can frame this war as a jihad, not just of Shia Muslims, but of the entire Islamic civilization against a foreign empire, and if the populations of those countries begin to move, then the governments of those countries face a crisis that has nothing to do with Iranian drones. They face revolution from within. Scenario 3 ends in one of two places. Either Iran succeeds in collapsing the GCC economic model, triggering a petrodollar crisis, causing a fundamental restructuring of global power, and positioning itself as the center of a new Islamic political bloc, or America responds with the one tool that bypasses all of this: ground troops at scale, or worse. And that is where the nuclear question becomes unavoidable. If you are a nation being systematically dismantled, your water supply attacked, your ethnic minorities armed and funded by your enemy, your economy strangled, at what point does the deterrence calculation shift? At what point does an actor with nuclear capability or near nuclear capability decide that the threshold has changed? That is not a question with a clean answer, but it is the question that defines the ceiling of scenario 3. So let me summarize what we have covered. Scenario 1 is the controlled bleed. Iran uses asymmetric drone and missile capabilities to drain American resources, destabilize the GCC, and erode the petrodollar without triggering a ground war. This is the most immediate scenario and the one already in motion. Scenario 2 is proxy expansion. Iran activates its full regional network simultaneously, stretches American operational capacity across 5 or 6 fronts, and bets on domestic American political collapse before military victory. Scenario 3 is a civilizational bet. Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, attempts to unify the Islamic world under its leadership, collapses GCC capital flows into American markets, and bets on destroying the economic engine of the empire rather than its army. These are not mutually exclusive. They are more accurately described as layers. Scenario 1 is already happening. Scenario 2 activates within weeks. Scenario 3 is a long game. What I want you to notice is this. None of these scenarios require Iran to win a conventional military engagement with the United States. Each one is designed around a single insight, that the American empire is not built on military strength alone. It is built on economic architecture, on the petrodollar, on GCC stability, on global confidence in the US financial system, and that architecture has a geography. It has a choke point 33 kilometers wide. We will continue this analysis as events develop. I will be tracking each of these scenarios against what actually happens on the ground, because the only way to know if the analysis is correct is to test it against reality in real time. If you found this useful, share it with someone who wants to understand this conflict without the noise. I will see you in the next one.